This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, everybody. We'll wait for a few more people to come in. I see a lot of people are coming in. I'm so excited. We really appreciate y'all's patience in the waiting room. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. We're almost there, or we're there now. Let's wait just a little bit longer to start. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. I see a bunch of people coming in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight at the Tourette Association of America for Managing Anger and Strong Emotions. My name is Haley Carlton, and I'm the Youth Coordinator here at the Tourette Association of America. You will find resources in the chat section of this webinar, including information on our upcoming Youth Ambassador, Rising Leader, and Junior Youth Ambassador training. Shout out to Alan and Dr. Hermitet for wearing their YA shirts. I love it. These resources are also going to be available in hard copies, for instance, the Young Adult Guide, by reaching out to support@tourette.org. I would now like to introduce to you our presenters for this evening, Dr. Katrina Hermitet and Alan Schoaf. Dr. Hermitet is a licensed clinical psychologist, a pediatric school psychologist at Akron's Children's Hospital, and an assistant professor of pediatrics at Northeast Ohio Medical University. She is the director of the Tic and Tourette Service, a recently designated Center for Excellence, and a certified CBIT provider. Prior to her faculty and clinical appointment, she completed her doctoral training in pediatric school psychology at Lehigh University. Her internship at Rutgers University Behavioral Health Robert Wood Johnson Medical School and her fellowship at Akron Children's Hospital. She continues to train both medical residents and psychology fellows regarding effective assessment and treatment for tic disorders. Alan is a graduate from Perry High School in Canton, Ohio, as a part of the class of 2021. Alan is currently taking time off from school to focus on work, personal projects, and fulfilling his role as a TAA Youth Ambassador and Rising Leader. Also, I am a Rising Leader. I forgot to let y'all know that as well. He's been a Tic and Tourette patient at Akron's Children's Hospital since 2017, where he was formally diagnosed. Alan was trained as a youth ambassador in 2019 and as a Rising Leader in 2022. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to put questions in the Q&A section on your panel at any time during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we're going to ask you to complete a survey. We are funded by the CDC to bring programs like this one to you. Please take the time to fill out the short survey at the end of this program, as your input is very valuable for future programming. Thank you and enjoy the webinar. And with that, I will give the floor to Alan and Dr. Hermitet.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience as we figured out all of this technical stuff. I actually think it's pretty ironic that we're talking about managing anger and strong reactions while we had to work for technology under pressure. So I almost feel like Alan and I put you guys in a simulation to get everyone's anger and frustration ready to present on this very important topic. So I want to thank the TAA always for such a great introduction. I don't even know why I put in an introduction slide, but like my team said, my name is Dr. Katrina Hermitet. I am at Akron Children's Hospital. Two pieces that might be important for you guys to know regarding this presentation is I also serve on the TAA Medical Advisory Board, and I'm a member of the Emotional Control Subgroup. And there actually are subgroups that nerd out about emotional control and anger and emotional regulation. So I feel very, very excited to talk to you guys about that topic today. So I will actually kick it over to Alan to introduce himself, and then we'll talk a little bit about where we're from. Alan?
Thank you, Katrina. Hi, like I said, my name is Alan Schoaf. I am a youth ambassador and rising leader for the Tourette Association of America. I have been a patient at Akron Children's since 2017 when I was formally diagnosed. Actually, I've been a patient of Dr. Hermitet's ever since that was the case and still am to this day. And like she said, I share her enthusiasm with this webinar. One of the things that we always have to go through is managing these emotions such as anger, and I'm really excited to be able to present with you guys on this.
Great. So I always feel like in addition to introducing ourselves, we have to introduce Akron, Ohio. So Akron, Ohio is its own city. We are not a suburb of Cleveland, but we're about 40 miles south of Cleveland. If you've heard of Akron before, the things that we're probably most famous for are the son of Akron, LeBron James, Devo, Chrissy from the Pretenders, the Black Keys, and probably the best burger of all time. I would say maybe even better than In-N-Out, and that would be Swenson's. So that's a little bit about Akron, Ohio. A lot of the topic that we're going to be covering today can actually be found in this really nice pamphlet that was developed by a couple of us in the subgroup in partnership with the CDC and Tourette Association. And so for those of you listening, I would like some more information or even some more information about the research base that we're pulling from. This is a really great material that was published by the TAA recently. With this topic today, I am hoping that we can have some fun, we can be open, we can talk about our own experiences with anger and strong emotion. And so I'll be honest, I am in the presenter role, and so I might not be able to see a lot of that really good chat that's happening. So feel free, my team members, if there's some good comments that are applicable to the slide we have, just interrupt Alan and I. And throw those out there, because my hope is to make this more discussion based and less didactic. So the agenda for tonight, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to introduce what's called the cognitive triangle. So for any of you that have been in therapy, so whether that's cognitive behavioral therapy, whether that's CBIT, or whether that's another type of treatment, this triangle might be very familiar to you. We're also going to talk about that anger and strong emotions. And, you know, it's pretty fun. While we were putting this together, I could not stop thinking about a specific Christmas movie. So we're going to actually anchor it to a couple holiday movie examples tonight. We're going to talk about our own triggers for anger and strong emotions. And then finally, we're going to wrap up our discussion by talking about coping with strong emotions. I always say this, that as a pediatric psychologist in this field, you guys are my greatest teachers. And so while I will be giving you a research base tonight, do not let me talk about your experience. So if you have great strategies for coping, if you have a unique insight on triggers that you have, please share those with us, because you, like Alan, are truly my greatest teachers.
Dr. Katrina, I just need to interrupt you just for a second. I don't think your slides are changing. I see you might be on slide 5, but we're still seeing the intro slide, the title slide.
Oh, so Wendy, I actually shot the presentation to you. Would you be able to maybe open it up on my behalf, and then I could just say click?
Yes, I'm going to do that right now. So if everyone can be super patient, we promise you this is going to be amazing. So please just
Hi everyone, while we wait, I can see you now though. Yeah, perfect. While we're waiting, we can just chat. Alan and I go so far back that we actually were matching shirts tonight. So that shows you how deep we roll. So while Wendy's sorting out the presentation, the actual shirts that we have on are about rising leaders. So I know we might talk about that a little bit later tonight. But in addition to being a rising leader and representing your state, you also get some pretty sweet swag. So a long sleeve t-shirt is very appreciated here in Northern Ohio winters.
Definitely. And for those of you that are super sensitive in terms of clothing, like I have to cut off tags on all of my shirts because they make me tick more. They're very comfortable. Like certain clothes make me tick away more than others, and this is one of those that even though I'm still ticking, it's way less frequent than it would be if I was just wearing a shirt that would be uncomfortable. So, oh, okay.
Like that, good plug. All right, looks like we have slides back again. Awesome.
There we go.
Great.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yes, thank you very much.
Perfect. This is the exact slide we're on. So Wendy, I'll just say click. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Great. So for those of you that don't know what click means, that actually was what we used to do when we had the projectors. So we used to have a projector prior to computers in the classroom. We would have a projector where it would, like, you'd actually click a button so that the like picture could fly through the screen. So let's talk about this cognitive triangle. And actually, I'm going to let Alan talk a little bit about this. So the cognitive triangle is the bread and butter of what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And the way that I describe cognitive behavioral therapy to others is often when you start treatment, whether that's tick treatment or therapeutic treatment, you look like that squiggle to the left, right? You don't know maybe where your thoughts and your behavior and your feelings start or begin. And so if you're working with a really solid cognitive behavioral therapist, they're going to take that squiggle and really help you organize across those 3 points, across those cognitive thoughts, those behaviors, and those feelings. And so, Alan, to the level that you're comfortable, could you talk a little bit about your own squiggle experience? So maybe how you arrived at CBIT.
Yeah, so when I first started beginning treatment and we went through the process of going through CBIT, there were a lot of nerves about going into what it would be like, because up until that point, I had never heard of what Tourette syndrome was. I just knew that I made a lot of sounds and movements, and I had a lot of emotional issues going into that made them way more frequent than they were when I was younger. Um, it led to me lashing out at times, being frustrated, and constantly having intrusive thoughts that were very self-damaging. And we didn't know where exactly to put into place where the thoughts began and where that led to certain behaviors, such as, unfortunately, self-harm. And we kind of had to go through the process of realizing that this cognitive triangle of trying to connect the feelings caused by the thoughts that led to the certain behaviors, and therefore just sort where the anger stemmed from those feelings that led to certain things like those intrusive thoughts and the behaviors that caused them.
That was perfect, right? And this is my $1 million question. So this, I always joke that this is how I'm going to save everybody thousands of dollars in therapy, right? So thoughts, feelings, behaviors. I can see the chat now, which makes me so excited. Does anybody know which of those 3 is the easiest to fix, the easiest to address? Thoughts, feelings, or behaviors? So put that in the chat if you guys have an answer. Of course, Alan, do not participate because you've heard me say this many times. Thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Which one is the easiest?
You can also put them in the Q&A. I can read them all.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we got
Awesome
one.
job, Mira. That's the right answer. Yep. Behaviors are the easiest to change, right? Which is the one that ain't ever going to change? This is very provocative what I'm saying tonight. So I'm getting recorded, but I'm sticking to this. Which is the one that isn't going to change? Man, Maida, you're on it. That's the right answer. Yes, feelings. So feelings is the right answer. So 10 years from now, if you guys decide to do therapy and a therapist says to you, hey, Maida, I'm going to change how you feel about something, fire that therapist, right? Because good therapists work on thought, right? Behavior is the easiest piece. So if someone's so angry, they're throwing lamps, we start on the throwing lamps part. We don't start on the why are you angry part. Let's take your anger away, right? The theory with CBT is if we start with behavior first, if we start with the easiest, that helps us change thoughts, which might drag and pull emotion, might drag and pull feelings. But there is a chance that feelings stay, and that's okay. So I've seen this great analogy going on around on Instagram about grief, right? If you have lost somebody, especially around the holidays, that can be a very challenging feeling to have. That grief might always stick with you. But those thoughts that you have around your grief process, or the behaviors that you engage in to quell grief, that's how we start to address that very complicated emotion. All right, you can click it, Wendy. All right, so this anger and strong emotions, what are they and how do we define them? So you can click this one. The best way I think that we can define strong emotions, you can see in holiday movies. And so many of you I know might be watching movies like National Lampoons or like Elf, we're going to talk about in a little bit as the season is getting closer. And so there are a lot of strong emotions in these holiday movies. In fact, that often becomes the big comedic portion of these movies. So have any of you, I can see the chat or the Q&A, have any of you seen this movie here, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation? Yeah, so it looks like people have seen this. Right, so the big zenith in this movie is when Clark Griswold just can't take it anymore, and he goes on this massive monologue. I was actually going to include it, but I didn't remember how many swear words it had in it, so I didn't.
Too many.
He goes on this massive monologue about how he is owed a bonus from his boss, right? And so I think that's a really important example that we're actually going to use tonight. So one of the things that I was going to have us do, and we won't do it for time, is something called a Mentimeter. And what that is we take words that you guys might experience and we'll make them into a cloud. And so what I'd like to do, Wendy, is I'd like everybody to put some strong emotion words in the chat. And then I will take all of those chat words and I will put them in a cloud and we can send them to our attendees. So when you hear the word or the term strong emotion, what type of words come up for you? Anger, violence, passion. What words come up for you when you hear the term strong emotion? What's a strong emotional word?
And I can read some of these off, Dr. Katrina. We've got
Perfect,
rage.
yeah.
Rage, that's a good one. Anger, out of control. Anger, love, sadness, rage again, hatred. Anger, wanting to break or punch something. Anger again. Those are strong emotions. Ecstatic, irate, fear. We have another fear. Destructive, wanting to cry out of anger. I've definitely been there, Myra. Confusing, that's a good one. Anxious, that's also a good one.
Yeah, those are great. Alan, would you want to add any words into that you've experienced? Any strong emotion words?
I was going to say hatred, but someone already beat me to it.
Ooh,
So
someone put
I think I'm gonna
exacerbated.
go with stressed would be mine.
Yeah, it's amazing too, because a lot of the words that I'm seeing in the chat are words I think that a lot of us have experienced, right? Anger and frustration and hatred after living through a pandemic and having so many of our opportunities for milestones pass us, right? Rage and sadness about people not understanding what tic disorder is or what we're living with, right? Like a lot of those words, love and passion, when you find that community or you find something that you're passionate and you're connected to. So many powerful words, right? And they really represent almost like the two poles of emotionality, right? Those strong emotions. I saw rage come up a lot, right? And as you guys know, a lot of times when we talk about tic disorder and Tourette syndrome, we talk about this concept of rage attack. So in the chat, have you guys heard of rage attack, or how would you define that concept of rage attack, this phenomenon that's historically associated with TS? Good. I see some chats coming in here. Yeah.
first moment of anger, rapid heart palpitation or tantrum, perhaps, rage attacks.
Yeah, that's perfect. Really, really good description. So what I would say in my field is that's a really, really good operational definition. That's really good. Alan, would you add anything to like the definition of a rage attack, or have you ever experienced a rage attack before?
Thankfully, I've never, as far as I know, I've never experienced a rage attack, but I do know someone who does have them at times. And the way that she has described them to me is almost being like blinded by your feeling of anger to where you don't even realize that you're lashing out. So that would be kind of what I have my knowledge of it just by what she's kind of told me about what they are like.
Yeah, that's a great description. We're going to talk a little bit more about those. So Wendy, you can hit you can click it. Oh, there's my cool gifts, guys. That is the zenith of my technology skills. I was so excited to put those in. Another theme that I heard is this idea of anger, right? So even rage would probably be a way that we define anger. So for those of you that might be DSM nerds or want to have a future in mental health therapy or psychology, the question I have for you guys is anger a mental disorder? So if I look in my DSM, my Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, am I going to find anger in there? Yep, perfect. Yeah, Rebecca, you got the right answer. Yeah, no, right? Anger is a normal human emotion, right? And so that wouldn't be in the DSM. When we think about the DSM, oftentimes those mental health conditions or those mental health phenomena result in functional impairment. If our anger gets so out of control that that anger then becomes driving the bus, potentially we could explore a DSM diagnosis or a mental health diagnosis. But anger is a part of the human condition, right? We just need to make sure that our anger and our rage doesn't then define the way that we navigate a social situation or have huge behavior ramifications for us if we decide to really capitalize on that rage moment. You can hit it, Wendy. Good job, guys. So what is anger? So when I look at the definition of anger, I consult what's called the American Psychological Association, or the APA. So this is the way that the APA defines anger. So anger is an emotion characterized by antagonism towards someone or something you feel has deliberately done you wrong. So look at how powerful that already is. So there's an antagonist, right? There is an aggressor that causes you to feel this. And a lot of times when you feel this experience, it's because you felt like someone has wronged you, right? Anger can be a good thing. It can give you a way to express negative feelings. For example, it can motivate you to find solutions to problems. However, this is what I was saying about functional impairment. Excessive anger can cause problems. And those problems can be things like blood pressure increases, right? Physical changes associated with anger, and really putting your brain in a fight or flight freeze space that'll harm your physical and mental health. And so looking at this definition, I can see Alan on the screen. Have you ever experienced anger like this before, Alan? And has that anger ever impacted your health?
Yeah, I have, whether it's at myself or recently, I started working about a year and a half ago now, and coworkers can be very frustrating. So, and it's led to a lot of tics at work, and has led me to be very stressed out, and even has caused like the blood pressure increase for me that can lead to an anxiety attack as well. And I've even had panic attacks at work from that. So I have, yes.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? So a lot of times we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but a lot of times if we remain in that anger space, that can actually trigger, like I said, that fight, flight, or freeze reaction in our body. And we can really set ourselves up for panic attacks, for rage attacks, for extreme emotional experiences when our anger really starts driving the bus. So for those of you that feel comfortable in the chat, have any of you experienced extreme anger at somebody or something, or does any of this piece of the definition apply to you or any of your lived experiences?
Just a reminder for y'all to put your responses in the Q&A panel rather than the chat, because the chat is disabled.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. So someone wrote in there and said definitely they've experienced these. Another individual said that their son has experienced this. Yeah, another person talked about how they can see it in their son. Okay, great. So now we can go to the next slide, Wendy. So some of you might be familiar with this. This is called the zones of regulation. And when I was finishing up, high school, this was becoming no pun intended, all the rage to use with our students that really were having emotional control issues at school. And the idea is that all of us can be at one part of this zone or another throughout the day or throughout our experiences. The blue zone is often when we're feeling sad, when we're feeling sick, when we're feeling tired, right? The green zone is really that space when we are ready to learn. So we're happy, we're calm, we're feeling okay, we're focused. The yellow zone is when we feel frustrated and worried or excited with some loss of control. And that red zone, that's what we're really talking about tonight. That's when we're incredibly mad and angry. We're terrified. We can even be engaging in physical aggression like yelling or hitting. Or we can be overly elated and overly out of control. And so across all of these zones, there's really kind of positive emotions and negative emotions, right? It's funny because often when I see patients in my own practice at Akron Children's Hospital, often they're in the green zone, right? We've created a safe space. They're talking about concerns that they may have had in the past or ways to help me prepare in the future. But a lot of times I'm trying to get them to learn skills in the green zone that they're going to have to apply in the red zone. And that really takes a ton of practice. So the example I often use is what's called like muscle memory, right? We have to practice and practice and practice relaxation and coping strategies while we're calm. Because when we're in the green zone, like this description says, that's the place where we're best ready to learn, right? So when somebody comes to see me and they might be mid-rage attack or mid-panic attack, my responsibility is to make sure that they feel safe. That it is not my responsibility to get them to learn. And for those parents, because I see a couple of parents in the chat, for those parents that have experienced rage attacks, oftentimes the best learning comes when that child's calm, right? When they're in a rage attack, in a lot of ways, at that moment, it might be too late, right? It might be making sure that our pets and our siblings are safe. We get them through that red zone moment. And then when they're back in that green zone, or maybe even in that yellow zone, we start to talk about coping skills, and we start to talk about what were the antecedent or the triggering conditions. So great slide. Actually, again, in the brochure that we made with the TREAD Association, we talk about this concept of zones of regulation. For any of you that have not experienced the zones of regulation, this is a skill set that occupational therapists are very, very well versed in and often use in their practice. Alan, any comment that you want to say about the zones of regulation? I saw your face. You look very familiar with this.
Yes, I actually have seen this before even going into CBIT treatment. Where in Canton, Ohio, mental health is something that is very prevalent and is preached tremendously, thankfully now, due to unfortunate circumstances within the area of many teenagers, especially suffering through a lot of mental health issues. So these zones of regulations were something that we see all the time at school. They would talk about, and I just want to say that it's possible to be in each one of these zones in one day and just have that mood change shift throughout the day. So if you're here for someone in your family, for say that happens, they may be completely in the blue zone towards the morning, and then later they could be in the red zone, and then later in that evening again they'll be in the green zone. I've had days like that where I've been absolutely in the red zone before, but by the time we get towards later in the day, I've managed to end up being in a good mood, and I would say that I was in the green. So, and like Dr. Hermitet said, I keep calling you Dr. Hermitet. I can just call you Katrina for the terms of this webinar, but it's such a habit. I apologize. Like she said, it's the easiest way to retain what we're going to go over, like these coping mechanisms later in this webinar, in that green zone. And by the time we get to that red zone, it can just be more difficult.
Yeah, I would also say too, this actually just came up for me today with a family. Oftentimes when families maybe refer to me or they're getting ready to start treatment, sometimes magically when it's finally their turn to start CBIT with our team, their child is suddenly in the green zone. They're happy, they're calm, their tics are in control. And so then they want to call our service and cancel. And so what I always say is I always provide this brochure. I always talk about the green zone because often the green zone is the best time to learn CBIT strategies and the best time to use cognitive behavioral strategies. All right, Wendy, you can hit it. So who is in charge of this? Like, who is in charge of all of these regulations of zones? Okay, and Alan knows that I am a huge brain fan, and probably one of my favorite parts of the brain is the frontal lobe. And so in this image, the frontal lobe is that blue part, right? Very easy to remember because the frontal lobe, it's in the front of your brain. And so if you ever have to take a test, like a brain test, the way I help kids remember this is like if you forgot your homework, if you left your gym clothes in the locker room, like if you forgot your house keys, you actually hit the right part of the brain that failed you. So when you forget something, you often go like, ah, right? Or if you messed up an algebra problem on a test, you're hitting the right part of the brain that failed you. You're not saying like, oh, I forgot my car keys. I'm hitting my occipital lobe. You're actually hitting the correct part. So the frontal lobe is in charge of all of this gorgeous stuff. Planning, problem solving, motivation, judgment, decision making, impulse control, social behavior, personality, memory, learning, reward, attention. Wow. Like those are the skills that we need to emotionally navigate every moment day to day. These are also, for those of you that have done CBIT, really, really important to CBIT success. Your frontal lobe has to be on fleek if you're having CBIT or cognitive behavioral success. I often describe this as the most expensive part of your body. So for those of us that are living in cold areas, right, that would be like our HVAC system, right? So if you have a very, very large monthly bill, the first thing that your mom or dad might do is turn the heat down, meaning it's going to be a little bit colder, right? Your body borrows from the frontal lobe when it's tired, when it's stressed, when it's overly excited, when it's sick, when it's hurt, right? And so these areas are probably areas that you have seen impacted after you pulled an all-nighter for school, after you had a sleepover, after you experienced something monumentally stressful, right? That frontal lobe is also in charge of our ability to shift zones. Okay, you can hit it, Wendy. Okay, perfect. My other favorite part of the brain, I might as well just say this, that we talk about a lot in my CBIT treatment is the motor cortex, right? The motor cortex is in charge of automatic movement. So it's all the stuff that we do that we really don't have to think about. A lot of times when people are in a rage attack, they are in fight, flight, or freeze. And so the part of the brain that's responsible for fight, flight, freeze, survival is the amygdala and the motor cortex. That's often why when people are in a rage attack or if people are experiencing extreme anger, they might physically act out and not even remember that they did that. So Alan, have you ever had an experience where you were living in your motor cortex where something was so extreme that you really weren't using that frontal lobe?
Yes, I've been in multiple. We'll pick a less extreme version for the sake of webinars. But I would say the very first time I've ever had an anxiety attack would be the one where it just impacted me the most, because for those of you who have had panic attacks before or have had them more often than not, more than once, the very first time you're having it is actually more terrifying than whatever the situation was that caused it, because you've never experienced that feeling before. And I just completely shut down. I did not know where I was. I forgot what breathing was and what it meant to do. And I couldn't move. I completely shut down. And yeah, there was nothing going on in that frontal cortex.
Yeah. So Alan, if you were in the midst of a panic attack or like a rage attack, and I was like, hey, let me tell you about that frontal lobe, that motor cortex, and that basal ganglia, would you be able to hear me if you were mid panic attack?
No, and if I did, it would immediately go in one ear and out the other.
Right, right. So that's kind of our theme of our discussion tonight, is a lot of times learning the most we can about our anger is actually learning when we are in that calm space, when we are in that when we're in that green zone. Great. Um, for those, I know a couple people wrote panic in the chat or feeling extreme anxiety and stress. The best example or phrase that I have heard about panic attack is that the body keeps score, which means that when people experience panic attack, a lot of times their body has been keeping score and storing energy for a long time, right? So they might have experienced stressor after stressor after stressor, and they didn't have an outlet, right? And so their body kept score, their body kept track, and then they reached that critical moment where their body might have felt like it had been chased by a python, but it was just another Tuesday night, and it went into full fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? That's the best example that I have to describe panic attack. And when we look at panic attack treatment, a lot of panic attack treatment is knowing our triggers and being able to tell our brain, even mid panic attack, I am having a panic attack. I am having a rage attack. Being able to have that kind of meta dialogue with your brain is probably the core, most important part of treatment. So now let's talk about triggers, right? That is a hot button word, I think, used a lot in your generation and my generation, right? We are very comfortable talking about the things that trigger us. And I love that as a therapist. I love that as a psychologist. And so I have this GIF. I just loved it. I think it might work. Wendy clicks it again. Again, I'm using all those holiday movies. Elf was triggered when that very poor Santa smelled of beef and cheese and wasn't fully committing to his role, right? So Elf became in an anger and a strong emotional spot, saying to Santa that he was living on a throne of lies because of his poor Santa impression. You can hit it, Wendy. Okay, so this is another one of those Mentimeters, those word clouds. So we're gonna have you guys type in the chat or type in the chat, right, guys? Not the Q&A. Type in whatever chat.
I'm sorry, Katrina, it's the Q&A, not the chat. They have to type it in the Q&A. Thanks.
Yeah, type in the Q&A, you guys. What triggers you? What kind of things trigger you into that anger space or that rage attack? Yeah, good one. So somebody wrote video games, particular people.
Yep. Particular people I definitely sympathize with.
Yeah, do you want to speak on that, Alan? Siblings.
Yeah. I went through dealing with pretty extreme bullying through my younger, like mid-teen years. And for the longest time, there were certain people that even just being around, they wouldn't even need to say a word. Just their presence being in mine was enough to just make me very unhappy and angry.
Yeah, so true, right? It's amazing too, the way that the body keeps score, that even if that person isn't around, just the thought of that person can induce feelings of anger, right? And so, Alan, if I was a CBT therapist, would I work on your feeling of anger towards that person or distorted thoughts about that person? What would I work on?
We would work on the thoughts, which we have done intensively.
Yes, we'd work on the thoughts, right? And so for the parents that are listening to this chat, another example that I have, or another really cool resource, is thought traps. So if you just Google thought traps, 100 worksheets should show up. And thought traps really are the foundation for anger and strong emotions. When my brain gets stuck in a loop of thinking about something, I set myself up for anger. So for example, one of the thought traps is black-white thinking. There is no gray. I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm good or I'm bad. I passed or I failed. So you can imagine if that's the way that I see the world, that black-white thinking, I set myself up for anger episodes. I set myself up for rage attacks because the gray is absolutely unacceptable in the way that I cognitively view the world, right? So let's look at this. This is another nice little triangle from the CBT world, antecedent behavior consequence. For any of you, and there might be a lot of you on this call that have had an FBA, so functional behavioral analysis, or an IEP or a Section 504, you might know these ABCs. The A, the fancy one, is antecedent. So those are those triggering conditions. What are those things happening before I experience an anger episode? Okay. If I'm working with someone that's experiencing extreme emotion, we might spend a buttload of time here. We might work week after week after week. And a lot of times what I'll have that child do is I will use the analogy of Steven Spielberg, right? The greatest director of our time. I want that child to Steven Spielberg that antecedent. I want to be there. I want to see it, feel it, smell it, taste it. I want to be in that triggering condition with them. Is it related to temperature when that person is in there with me that triggers me? Is it related to smell? Is it related to physical sensations? Because a lot of the really good intervention work actually is focused on those antecedent conditions. The behavior is what you do. So after that setting event occurs, what's the behavior, right? And the final one is the consequence. So the consequence can be positive or negative, right? So the consequence might be the triggering condition is I'm playing video games and I'm loving it. My parent takes that away. The behavior is I tantrum. And the consequence is maybe my mom's so frustrated with hearing me whine, she gives the video game back. That'd be a positive consequence, right? Maybe my mom is so annoyed and agitated, she takes my video game away for a week. That would be a negative consequence. So sometimes parents can get stuck in an anger loop because they're accidentally giving positive consequences to that anger episode or to that rage attack. Okay, you can hit it. So this slide we kind of covered, so for time we won't go too in depth into this, and I'll make sure that you guys have the slides as well. This is getting to know that anger, right? Getting to really see those anger episodes. I hate to use this example, but those anger episodes as friends, right? When do they show up? What are the things that make them bigger? What are the things that make them smaller? What are the aspects of the episode that cannot be changed? What can we change about that situation? What are our thoughts and our feelings when we're feeling out of control, right? And if you're in an anger provoking situation, are you able to accept those thoughts and the situation, or is there anything that we can really change? Okay, you can hit that, Wendy. So I want to push pause here. I know we're getting close on time, but I'm happy if it's okay with you guys. I can even run over a little bit just to make sure that everyone feels supported and we're hitting all the core topics today.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Amazing.
great. Ellen, anything you want to add about triggering events or antecedent events or the way that we start to know our anger triggers?
Not any more than you basically had covered. I mean, the way you said like making your anger your friend, it made me think of a little bit more something a little bit different, but because anger is, I feel like friend is such a positive tense and anger is not exactly that. I kind of think of it, my sister loves to draw and she loves to create characters when she does. And I like to think of them as like your OCs, which are, for those of you who do not know, that means original characters. And when she draws out, she gives them like these extensive backstories, and she even does like what their day-to-day schedule looks like. And so it makes me think of that, like, even if you don't feel attached to your anger, which, I mean, because of what it is, you probably don't want to, you need to know the when it comes on, when those triggering events happen, like she said, when you said making it your friends. So that's kind of the way I think of it as, because I don't know, thinking of it as your friends for me is like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's really fair, right? And, you know, all of us experience anger in a different way, right? And if we try really, really hard to control an emotion that's very natural to the human experience, all we do is still experience that motion, but also add guilt and shame. And for any of you that have experienced guilt and shame, I would say that those are probably the darkest, most complex emotions, right? And so there are things that you might be angry about. And there's something about radically accepting that that emotion is a true emotion that you're feeling without trying to change it, but really working on those cognitions and really working on that behavioral output. That just because we're angry, that doesn't mean we need to make the environment angry, right? Or we engage in angry behaviors, or we have really, really distorted thoughts. So now let's talk about learning to cope. So as you guys remember from all of my movie examples, so Elf loved coping with his syrup and sugar, right? So when he was feeling really stressed out about this new relationship that he had with his dad and being home alone for the first time while his dad was at work, he loved him some spaghetti and marshmallows. So we're going to talk about maybe effective and not effective ways to cope. So you can hit it, Wendy. Okay, my other movie example. So this is like the feelings thermometer, right? So for those, and I might be aging myself, maybe there's teens that are like, I have not seen this movie she keeps referencing. But like I said in the beginning of our presentation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Clark Griswold is a ticking time bomb. So in the very beginning of the movie, he starts kind of in that blue range, right? That blue zone of regulation. And then as the movie continues, he gets more and more and more angry and frustrated. So then he has this big moment, his big monologue. For those of you that have seen this movie, I'm going to watch the Q&A. What were his triggering conditions? So what moved him into that red zone by the end of the movie? Can anybody remember some of these?
Someone said not getting money, lights
Yep.
didn't work,
Yeah.
constant pressure,
Yep.
family drama,
Yes, there it is.
not being able to pay for the pool for his family.
See, y'all saw it? Oh, this makes my heart full. Could you imagine if I pulled this analogy? Everyone's like, only you watched that movie, Dr. Hermitage. Yes, right? So exactly, I like the person that said constant pressure. He was feeling pressure from his family, from his in-laws, from his judgy neighbors, right? And it cooked and cooked and cooked until he had a straight up rage attack, right? So now we're going to talk about maybe ways that he could have coped before the mega monologue that I can't share with you because of all of the swearing. So hit it, Wendy. Okay, great. We're back to this darn triangle again. So this is probably my theme, is this shape. So there are ways that we can cope our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. Okay, you can click it. All right, so let's start with feelings. Hey, remember that thing that I said that's impossible to control, right? A really, really good tool that I often use for younger patients, but I think can be a really effective tool for even some of my very advanced learners and my younger patients is what's called the feelings thermometer. So being able to recognize when is the lowest of the low in your emotion thermometer and when is the highest of the high, and being able to rank that, okay? I have worked, and I mean it, with some of the most brilliant people I have ever met, and they all have TS and tic disorder, right? Some of these brilliant, brilliant people cannot give me emotion words when I ask how they are feeling, right? They want to stick in thoughts, they want to stick in behaviors. And so one of the best tools that we can use when we start working on coping is to get really, really effective at using appropriate language to describe our internal experience and being able to rank that experience on a thermometer. So for those parents, this might be something that I could print out and put right on my refrigerator. You could ask your child, how are you feeling today? And you could start to introduce a lot of these words into your child's vernacular. When I see kids in my practice that are engaging in tantrums or just nonverbal physical frustration and aggression, often it's because they haven't been taught the language to communicate how they're feeling. If they only use the words, if they only know the words mad, happy, sad, and they're feeling something else other than those three, it's going to come out in their body language because they don't have the verbal language for it. Okay. what's really nice about this, and I can share this for you guys as a handout, is we talk about what we can do. We're not changing those emotions, right? But when we're feeling this, what might be some good tools that we can use for our body? So for example, if I'm feeling bored or disappointed or lonely, one of the things I could do is work my body out. And that's a strategy I use a lot. Sometimes when I feel the most tired, that's when I have my best workouts, right? If I'm feeling confused, embarrassed, excited, I'm acting clingy and hyper, I could take deep breaths. I could tell my body I'm not in fight or flight. I could engage in positive talk to get myself out of those thought traps, right? If I'm agitated and angry, right? Or if I'm shutting down, I can take deep breaths. I can take a nap. I can pull myself out of a situation. Alan, looking at these, are any of these strategies that you have used before along the range of the feeling thermometer?
Yes. I am a firm believer and consistent preacher of the combination of diaphragmatic breathing and muscle tension relaxation. I feel like I say it more than Katrina does at this point in my life. Whenever I am feeling stressed out in that the yellow range, that zone on the thermometer, whether it's like on the verge of getting really angry, like I'm on the border of that red line, or I'm starting to panic, or anything like that, I take those deep breaths through the nose, out the mouth, and I clench up my fists while I'm inhaling. And as I'm exhaling, I release the tension in my fists. And I do that for about 5 minutes, sometimes longer, depending on the situation, if it's needed. And there are many others on here that I do as well. I'm looking a lot in the blue because the blue is where, for the longest time, I have resided, that I also do. But the one that I find myself doing the most, that has the most to do with that going into that red zone, would be those deep breaths and that muscle tension relaxation.
That's excellent. That's perfect. Which again, we're going back to that concept of the motor cortex, right? That when we're feeling extreme emotion, whether that's panic, whether that's anger, right? The best thing we can do is just remind our body that there is no python chasing us. There's no lion chasing us. We're safe and we're okay. So teaching your children or teaching yourself those strategies to remind your body that you're safe, that's how you pull yourself out of those attack zones. Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next slide, Wendy. And this is Alan set us up perfectly for this discussion, that often when we're thinking about feelings, the best feelings intervention that we have is relaxation, right? So he talked about these: deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and mindfulness. So a couple of the strategies that we talk about in mindfulness could be guided imagery. What that means is if I'm in the midst of a rage attack, or I feel myself going into a rage attack, we make a happy place, right? So, if my happy place is the beach at the Outer Banks and I can feel myself going into a panic space, sometimes just imagining myself at that beach could pull me out of that. And when you're mindfully imagining, you are using all 5 senses. So if I'm sitting at Ocracoke, what does the sand feel like under me? What is the smell of salt in the air? That's the way that works. Grounding, this can be a great tool for parents. Even if your child is a teenager, playing I Spy, that's probably the best strategy I have. So sometimes when kids are mid-rage attack, I will coach the parent to say, I spy something yellow in the middle of their rage attack, right? Because that grounds you, that brings you back to your visual cortex. And that has been a very successful strategy for kids that are already in full panic or rage mode to kind of come back to earth and use that amazing visual cortex to bring you kind of back at your feet. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're on behaviors, right? This is that air quote easiest part of the triangle, right? And these can be really hard to do. So I am not saying these are easy. So for any of you that's been full on anger episode and rage attack, even thinking of the idea of walking away, especially if it's towards an aggressor, can be really, really hard. Alan gave another really good example of moving your body. So even if that's clenching your fist or walking in place, or doing something kind of safe so you don't take out your aggression on others, would be a great tool. And always take a break. Man, that is such a successful strategy when done appropriately. And I've even had little kids say, hey, I can feel myself getting to the red zone. I need to take a break. And even using that language with their parent. So if their parent is triggering them about finishing their homework or cleaning their plate, and that's causing them to get angry, and the choice is that they either walk away from the dinner table or have an anger episode, I'll take that walk away and take a break any day before we get into that critical red zone. So again, really, really good strategies. So Alan or anyone in the Q&A chat, have any of you ever used these strategies when you're really angry? Walking away, moving your body, taking a break?
While you guys are typing, listening to music, I am shocked that I did not mention on the last slide. That is my favorite thing to do, regardless of the situation. I feel like it can be perfect if you're in any zone. If you need to focus, it's something to keep you in that background noise. I'm sure a lot of people in the chat know that that's something that can keep you focused. I'm like that a lot. I don't know if any of you else are. If you're starting to get very anxious and angry, putting on some calming, slower music can help ground you. If you're feeling really down, some more upbeat music can kind of lift your spirits per se. And even some weird ones, like I'm very strange in this regard, but I like listening to heavy music when I'm feeling angry, because it's like kind of this escape that someone else is letting out the emotions that I need to, in a way that I know I'm not going to do anything that is harmful to anything or someone around me, such as breaking things or just starting to yell. It allows that release at times. And I know that's very odd and not many people do that. And if you don't, totally fair. But that's just something that I like to do that helps me out.
That's a great one. And there's someone in the chat that actually had a very similar experience to you, Alan. So they described that listening to music or getting outdoors is a great tool for them. There was another parent that described their child's experience and said that, you know, a lot of times using mindfulness can be challenging. That's totally fair, right? And Alan knows this, that a lot of times when I'm working with patients about relaxation or mindfulness, we actually create a menu for it, because not every day are people going to want a cheeseburger. Some days you want a taco and some days you want pizza. So what we really do in my treatment is we do trial and error. We come up with a menu of items to emotionally regulate, because some don't work for people. Like, for example, I've had a lot of patients tell me that progressive muscle relaxation, even the phenomena of tightening up those muscles, can induce a stress response or a panic attack. So if I'm working on relaxation and stress management, and one of my key tools I want to teach you is going to cause you to feel more stress, that's on me as the clinician. That isn't on you as the patient. And so maybe that might be a least preferred item on the menu. Okay, great. We can go to the next slide. And excellent thoughts. So like I said, good therapists work on thoughts. Therapist thoughts both have a TH, right? So step one, challenging those negative thoughts. So we have to identify what those are and the traps that we get in again and again and again. So again, for those parents listening, or for those good self-advocates, I want you to look up that thought trap worksheet. I think there's 12 or 15 thought traps. If you are able to print that out and identify the trap that you keep falling in, man, I'll save you thousands of dollars in therapy. You'll put me out of business, right? If you are able to identify the way that your brain goes when you are experiencing extreme emotionality, that's half of the game. Once you have identified those thought traps, then you engage in positive self-talk, or what I like to call thought challenges. So if I have black-white thinking, using that example from prior, if I have black-white thinking, the positive talk or the alternative thought would be, it's okay to be in the gray zone. And I might say that externally, so I might say that out loud, but I'm going to practice that internally, right? So first identify the thought trap, then identify a challenging thought. Oftentimes that challenging thought is the opposite of the thought trap, okay? When you get really good at that, that might take months to be able to do that. When you get really, really good at that, then you start asking questions like this. What might make this situation better? What do I have control over? And what do I not have control over? And how can I deal with that? How can I help myself, right? So when I see patients that come see me, and maybe it's been a while since they did CBIT or CBT, and they come to me like a squiggle, when they dump their stress on me, the first thing we might do is we might sort out what is in their control and what is out of their control. And Alan, I think I even remember doing this strategy with you before. When you've come to me with a laundry list of stressors, really being very coherent about what's in control and what's out of control. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just briefly. We're not going to dive into too many details for mainly time. But there have been points in my life where when we get to the time where I'm in my appointments, that there are just so many things stacked up. And a lot of them I had little to no control over. And I think a lot of that was from my senior year and freshman year of high school. There was just so much going on, and it made me so overwhelmed. And we had to figure out the things that I knew for a fact that I could grab by the reins and steer right on the right path. And then the other ones where I kind of had to ride out that roller coaster loop until we could get to the end and figure out where we're going to tackle each path and how we're going to go about it. And it could take a lot of work to do, and it could be a collaborative effort. There are times where I knew for a fact that there were certain situations that I could handle, and I said, I got this, I can do this. And there were other times where I'm like, these emotions are getting to me. I need someone to come help me so that I can let this out and we can tackle this together. And it's trying to find that balance of where you yourself are going to be able to stop yourself and regain that control, and the other times where you know that you need to let other people in to help you remember those coping strategies to get you back on that track. And it may take a while to figure out when those situations come to be and how to separate both of those from each other, but like everything, it takes time. So
perfect, right? And I think of an example too, hearing from you and thinking about our chapters together. I think about the pandemic that we lived through, right? A lot of patients, especially patients that had that OCD comorbidity, were feeling very, very out of control. And a lot of them that had contamination fears came to me and said, Dr. Hermitet, I told you this was coming. They were prepared for this more than I was, right? And so while they might not have control over the contamination of COVID or the proliferation of COVID, something that they might have control over is how much media they were consuming, right? And so that would be a goal, because that's a behaviorally anchored goal, that maybe we limit media consumption, because that media consumption was causing us to have massive fear response, and that fear response might not change, and that's okay, right? But it also made us put ourselves in a cognitive trap or a thought trap of catastrophizing. So again, using that CBT, that thoughts, feelings, behavior, and sorting it out. All right, so last and final slide. Again, so these are all our strategies kind of across the spectrum. So the theme that you've heard across all of these is to take a break. So we can go to the next one. This made me laugh. Actually watched this holiday movie this weekend, right? Thinking about this presentation, that when little Macaulay Culkin here found out that his parents did indeed leave him at home while they went on their international trip, he lost emotional control in the best way ever. So he was eating pizza, running around, shaving his face. So a great example of him probably in the red zone there with his excitement. So I am happy, team members, to take questions in the chat and stay on as long as you guys need to feel supported. I can also answer those chat questions by email too if the asker has left. Again, thank you guys so much. You being here and learning about anger is step 1 to 97. And so I'm really, really proud of those of you that have gotten on here at 7 o'clock at night in the middle of a school or work week. That shows me what an advocate you are for your children and what an advocate you are for yourself. So again, just so incredibly honored to be part of this community. And I'll take any questions. Thanks, Alan, always for being my partner and my greatest teacher.
Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Thank you guys again as well. I'm just going to reiterate everything said there. We appreciate so much just being able to hear us out with everything that we do. And I'm very grateful that we have people like you that are willing to advocate for your kids, yourselves, or any other family members that you know. And it just means a lot. Sorry, Haley.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to thank you both, and thank you to all of our attendees. I'm taking a look at the Q&A section to see if there were any last last minute questions. We also will, for any questions that didn't get answered, we can send a follow-up email and answer those questions. But yes, once again, I just wanted to thank you so much, Alan and Dr. Katrina. I especially found this webinar very useful for somebody who has had a unfortunate history when it comes to rage attacks. And so I was listening and I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to list all my triggers, but I know it would. But yeah, I just wanted to tell y'all that I really appreciated it, and I hope our attendees did too. Our attendees will also be receiving a follow-up email with the link to our survey. We do ask you to fill this out, as your feedback is very important to us, so we can continue providing quality programming like this webinar here at the TAA. And if you would like any hard copies of our resources, like some of the ones that I included in the chat, or if you need to reach out to the TAA, you can always contact us by email at support@tourette.org. That was also put in the chat, or you can call 1-888-4-TOURETTE. That's TOURET. And lastly, if you are interested in applying to the Youth Ambassador, Rising Leader, or the Junior Youth Ambassador programs, the deadline to apply is December 23rd. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me, Haley, at haley.carlton@tourette.org. And I thought I put that in the chat, but I didn't. So in case you know how to spell my name correctly, it is in the chat for you, Haley. But yeah, once again, thank you to our amazing presenters, and thank you to everyone for attending our webinar tonight. Y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you guys. You inspire me every day. I put my email in the chat as well, so feel free to reach out to me. You're my greatest teachers. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tourette Association.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.